So this is about, 2-minute long video. I'll play this and we'll go through the whole kind of experience of developing it, essentially.
What is belonging? Belonging is about exploring, and exploring is about discovery. With current technology, that sense of discovery has been lost. We're experiencing things even before we've discovered them for ourselves. Introducing the Torch app, powered by AirBnB hosts. Through their profiles, hosts recommend locations and experiences in their city, and tag these recommendations with descriptive and emotive language. Hosts do not just share the coordinates, they share their experience. We tap into the Airbnb culture, a community based in the sharing of personal and unique experiences. First, users define the distance they want to explore, and are presented with a list of descriptive tags in their area, selecting the word that best describes the kind of place they want to discover. The app does not show the user's location or the destination. Instead, it simply shows distance and direction. When you're heading in the right direction, the distance is in focus. When off course, it starts to blur. Users follow the app, not knowing what they'll discover. Once at a destination, users can send positive feedback to hosts. These thank yous can form rep and empower the host's inside knowledge of the area. This in turn will lead to hosts recommending more, helping the Torch app to grow and encouraging the Airbnb community to keep sharing. So how do we get the word out? Airbnb are already known for curating unique events around the world. What if a Michelin-star chef was cooking in a little-known bistro, or a famous musician was playing an acoustic set in a local pub, and the only way to find these unique events was using the Torch app? Clues were revealed through social media channels, revealing what the event may be and the specific words users need to search for in the app to find them. The word magically appears on the list of tags on the day of the event. Users can select it and follow the trail. More shares leads to more clues. It builds up momentum and excitement about the event. Torch utilises the existing Airbnb community. It stimulates the sharing of experience and the sharing of knowledge, spreading the message of discovery, adventure, and belonging to everyone.
Yeah, so that was the video, and then along with the video there was about 4. Oh, can you hear me?
What is belonging? Belonging is about exploring.
There we go.
Yeah, so we did this 2-minute long video, which feels very concise, but it was after quite a few weeks of working out exactly how we were gonna tell that story. And we should have put the original brief up here, but it was about spreading the idea of belonging to existing and new users of Airbnb. So it was all about this idea of belonging. Yeah, don't know if you...
It was very much like a brand awareness sort of thing, wasn't it, really? It was sort of, I think at this stage, Airbnb was obviously kind of, I think they just rebranded and they were picking up, they were kind of getting bigger and bigger, and it was more trying to convey that sort of, that brand ethos they have about the idea of being able to go to a city and being, and sort of interacting with an Airbnb host who knows the area and getting a real sense of, a real flavor of a city, sort of like in a very authentic way. And so, yeah, as Andy said, we after scripting for a while, which I think was probably the longer process, over about 2 or 3 days, we sort of sat in Andy's room and basically both just animated different sections of the video and then edited it all together after doing like the voiceover and things. And then also we also used some supporting images as well to basically to talk about the actual functions and to talk about like the finer points, because I guess one of the things with the videos, you want it to be more about selling the idea, and then you'll obviously have made a bunch of extra details that you want to kind of cover, at least make sure that they know that that you've thought a lot about it in a sense.
Tell us a little bit about those keywords that you used as well, didn't you? You know, you came up with a few words, didn't you, that were very, very precise and very direct, weren't they? That's a talent, isn't it? And it's a trick, isn't it? Really, and it's a way of engaging those users. It's a way of engaging those judges as well, isn't it? Like the word belonging, for example. You know, coming up.
I think so one of the in preparation for this, we did I think D&AD used to come and do some workshops with us in the uni. And I remember one of the takeaways from one of the workshops was to take your brief and to kind of through a few stages try and simplify it down to 16 words essentially, because because I think obviously, I think with most of the time you can usually like the answer to the brief will be actually in the brief, especially in terms of the terminology they use. So belonging was there a lot, discovery, and sort of those sorts of words about where kind of in the brief they show, by using their own language, they show what's important for them and what they're really marking for in that sort of sense.
I mean, we echoed a lot of the brief in the voiceover and how we presented this idea. So you kind of like, we just hammered the thing they were asking for over and over again in the context. And I think that's always important.
I think you're totally right, Andy, isn't it? It's like, tell them back what they've told you. You know, don't stray too far from the concept, is it, of what they're asking you to do, but find, of course, your own imaginative approach to deal with this, isn't it, to deal with the task, but always keep central to that concept, really, is what a winning award does.
So the original brief was something about spreading the idea of belonging. So we spent a lot of time understanding what belonging meant, and belonging to us in the context of Airbnb, and feeling so at home that you're comfortable walking down strange alleyways, or you're comfortable just kind of wandering around. So belonging is about exploring, and like, as soon as we had that link, we would just explore it in any which way possible. And it's that core idea that kind of makes this idea work, I think.
I think that's right. Will, you can talk about that, because you were you discussed your first idea, which was about the hermit crabs, wasn't it? And I remember that now, because hermit crabs take their homes with them, don't they? But actually, go on.
I can give you the kind of, this is, I think everyone's got a few of these stories where they say, I had this idea and then I saw it being done by a brand later on. And so I have notes of that hermit crab idea. The idea of which being that hermit crabs are very selective about how they choose their homes. And the idea was essentially to create on some hermit crab shells, to create these hermit crab shells, which had little kind of Airbnb style, like apartment building, like a little kind of Venetian apartment or something, or like built on these hermit crabs, and then to kind of show that sort of thing. And then I think Trivago or something, or like some sort of travel destination company, a few years later did a hermit crab related idea and that kind of thing. But it's but all those themes, all those kind of like metaphors for that central concept of belonging, and like looking, I think at one point I was even looking in like I think I got that sort of little like thread from looking at a big chart of different animals that symbolize certain behaviors, like elephants symbolizing memory, for instance, you know, that as an animal, and then hermit crabs, where it was about belonging, the idea that you find your perfect shell. And so you can get these sort of things, I think, and as you said, it all comes from those key words that are going to go throughout the brief. So you can start really kind of digging into, I think that's also a good way of making sure you don't obviously go off too far. I think what you were talking about before in terms of you're trying to actually satisfy the brief and answer the brief, but obviously at the same time you can't do that without bringing your own creativity in what you really want to do into it as well. And I think that kind of combination is really where that's where the kind of magic happens in terms of being able to do both in a way that actually makes sense at the end.
And that, but then you added something really nice, and I remember the conversations we had, which was about, we took exploring, and then you made exploring about getting lost, didn't you? And then you took that getting lost, and you found a way of presenting that visually, didn't you, as well, which was through the blur as well. So do you want to, that was a really strong element to this project.
So I can just tee this up for Andy, because so I had so I think I had a concept of the idea of like using your current mood to determine what you want to do. But then it was really talking to Andy, because Andy had worked on a thing called the Flaneur app, which was all about that, exactly what you're saying. I think Andy, you could talk about that more.
So yeah, funnily enough, in second year, I'd done this project about navigating the city in different ways, and I'd made this thing that looked like an iPhone. It was like plastic, but it had a very simple LED light in it that would kind of point in a direction of somewhere interesting, but you wouldn't know where you were going until you got there. And there's a concept called psychogeography, I think it is. It's about like exploring a city in a different way, like, or familiar spaces using like an emotional Well, that's not it. There's a concept of psychogeography, and there's this concept of being a flaneur, which is like wandering with intent and kind of just soaking up an atmosphere. It's quite a well-known phrase these days, but yeah, it was that idea I'd explored, and then when Will was talking about this, it felt like a very useful thing to pick up again and see how it fitted in with this brief. And actually, it's not too many. This is a developed version of it, but the core idea I'd explored in second year, and then all this stuff kind of fitted together. That kind of story about getting lost and feeling like you belong simultaneously. It all started to blend together under this one umbrella really easily. And we just kind of allowed ourselves to pull that thread and kind of explore how that goes. So I think like the app itself is not a winning idea.
Should we go through our little, because we've got some little slides that kind of go through some of these points.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Click through them, just because but yeah, it's because of there's sort of things to do with the actual, like, basically just sort of the kind of slightly shambolic, chaotic way in which we came to this idea, just to kind of give you guys a sense of the fact that if you feel like you're kind of like clutching at straws in certain times or switching between different briefs because one kind of takes your fancy at a certain time, that it's not necessarily a bad thing, because sometimes something can just grab you, and then that's the reason why you should pursue that. So because yeah, so as I said before, I'd worked in the Airbnb thing and done a few different ideas. Andy was working on a completely different award scheme, I think at the time, like the RSA or something. And then yes, we weren't even working together at the start of it, but sort of.
I was just saying, back that Jago here taught us all about, De Bono's 5 hats and all those things. So it was about like doing this really quick idea generation, really quickly evaluating all these stupid ideas like set it on fire, don't set it on fire, digital, not digital, and like really pushing ideas we had. But very quick. I literally like just scribbling on post-its like madmen, but it was just getting
the methods really work. Don't they? Like I still use a lot of them now in terms of like traffic light style things where you put down loads of ideas, like you have like a whole brain dump basically, or using like the double diamond method and things, like all those sort of techniques they're really great ways, especially if you're stuck, to actually just start to kind of get the process like sort of going, and also just to be able to trim the fat and not spend loads of time on random ideas, in a sense.
And I mean, I think it's worth mentioning at this point we weren't actually talking. Oh, go back.
Where do you want to? Which one?
Go back, up slide. Yes, at this point we weren't actually working together, and we didn't like set up a team like right from the beginning. But we, at one point, there must have been a day where we decided that it was really worth us putting our heads together properly. But we were constantly talking about this stuff, and it's kind of sad that in this current time period, that kind of studio culture is a bit lost. But just like sitting in the same room together and like muttering away to yourself is such a powerful thing, and seeing something on someone else's screen from across the room and asking why is that there, like, that's such a important thing. that's quite a, I don't know if that's quite a depressing thing to hear right now, but there's digital ways.
I'd say to add to that, you can seek people out who are interested in this sort of stuff. And there's a great thing I saw the other day from an artist collective who were talking about how doing it was called like a motivation exchange or something like that. It was like a fascination exchange where you like seeking people out and asking them what they're really interested in now for like 5 minutes, and sort of actively building that into your practice to kind of go and talk to people about stuff that's really kind of grabbing them at the time. And these are all things that are still completely available, and you can do just as well over Zoom, because it means that once you're bored, you can just hang up. You don't have to walk away weirdly. So I think, there's definitely ways to kind of factor that in. But yeah, it's such a great strength to have especially people on a course who are all doing the same thing. It's really important. But yeah, I think we've gone through this whole bit about having different ideas and then it chiming with Andy's idea. Obviously going back to the brief, and obviously those keywords about belonging, exploring, and discovery, tying that all together. And then Andy, your point about it not being a winning idea on its own.
Yeah, and just get back, that belonging is about exploring thing. Like, it's not that's not a million, like I think what made Airbnb a good project is that we made this link between things and then were able to like back it up. You know, it was like an emotional thing that people were, once you explained it to them quite quickly, people are on board with.
And those and what you say here, Andy, is these are things that they talked about themselves. So you made links within their own words, didn't you? Really. So you bought these statements out of what they were already saying, weren't you? And you just made it sound more together and concise and clear, and gave us a story through it, really, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, like in all this, like I see it in client work all the time now. Like they do tell you what they want very clearly, and it's actually, it's kind of, it can take quite a long time to get that simplicity of thought, but like it's all the bits are there usually. You just have to work out how to say it very concisely.
But also, part of the difficulty there as well is also being able to turn it into something you're interested in doing, isn't it? Because the client will tell you what you want, but you've also got to be able to present what they want, but also make it interesting for you to get the best out of your practice, haven't you?
We have some slides on that later on, actually.
Well, they essentially, because the client essentially hires you for your expertise, and I think we forget that a lot when we're, because I think there's a trait usually within people who are creative to people please quite a bit, because we're thinking about other people's needs and what they want, and sometimes it is that factor of going, what does the brand need, and also you get a good, because one of the things about this project is that you get a good gauge from talking to your fellow students, talking to people you know who are the kind of people who might use this, and seeing and I think that's the thing that I enjoyed the most about this particular project in comparison to some of the other ones I was working on, was how you'd show this to people and they'd be excited and they'd go, I'd really use that. That sounds really fun. I wish it already existed. And that sort of, like that as a little kind of gauging test is a great, like, and the fact that you've got these people around you is like a good way of like knowing if you're onto a winner, or at least if you're on something that you.
That's something I've stayed with me actually throughout. Like when you get people's like eyes light up when you see it, or like express themselves like verbally or otherwise, that's when you know something's good. Like when you get that like human reaction out of an idea. People are very nice about your work and whatever, but it's when someone goes like literally goes, oh wow, or something, that's when you kind of realize something's clicking.
So it's when they add stuff. It's when people go, like, there's that kind of thing with ideas, isn't it? The fact that when an idea is fun and it's good and it's interesting, people want to take it on themselves and they want to think of things they can do with it. And it's like a great way of like knowing whether someone's actually engaging with an idea it's not whether they go, oh yeah, great, you've great work, you've done so well. It's when they start, oh, you could use it for this, and oh, and that's amazing. Have you thought about this? And when they start jumping in, then you're, that classic thing of like wanting them to almost think it's their idea, or to think it's so simple that they could have had it. Those things always feel a bit like we don't want people to have that, because we want to be the creative one. But sometimes that's a good way of trying to like sell an idea in as well.
This is where we disagree, right? So I don't think the Torch app itself is a particularly like, exciting idea. What I think is really exciting is that you can use that app to find secret events that Airbnb are posting, and it's all about kind of creating this whole global program of events that are based around Airbnb's core like value or like key differentiator was hosts, and like it's being made to feel at home. And like I think what the idea did was it used the key thing that made Airbnb special and like amplified it. And I think that's what made the whole idea work,
I think we do actually agree on this now. I think because we added the word alone, although it says along there. There's a typo there. But I think once we added alone, I think I do actually agree with this. I think because I went to a few interviews when we graduated, and I remember some of the feedback I used to get about what they liked about this idea was that sense of the fact that it took Airbnb from just being a place where you book things into suddenly they're not into everything. Like they used to be everything leading up to you having your amazing trip. And then now they're like everything you do on the trip as well is also sort of attached to the brand, and that being a really kind of like that extension is like from a business point of view, made a lot of sense. That's when we were showing it to sort of people in the industry who only think about how much the client would be happy and be like seeing dollar signs in that kind of way.
Not to blow our own whistle, but like a year after this all came out, they suddenly started putting on these like chef nights in a little restaurant, and there's all these different things that they started to do, which maybe they'd already started to think about, but we like to think that someone at Airbnb saw this and thought it was cool. It took some stuff from it.
I think so we kind of put together like I think 5 or 6 points around just around sort of, and I think they're kind of echoing what we've already been talking about in terms of kind of ways to guide your D&AD sort of experience or your project. Is I think one of the things that I always thought is that if you make something that you personally find interesting, for a start, like it means it's something that even if you don't have like the success or you don't get like shortlisted or something, it's still something you might work on later on because you like the idea of it, and because at the end of the day, that's the reason why we all do this in the first place, is because we get caught by ideas and we want to make them into something. And also, I think as a kind of cautionary thing, I think in the years after I did a few competitions, and I sort of, because of going through the D&AD experience, I got a bit stuck in this mindset of trying to make stuff in the D&AD mold of things. So almost trying to kind of, you could like, if you go onto the D&AD sort of site and look at like loads of the previous winners, you can start trying to like almost reverse engineer stuff that other people have made, and it's not going to do you any good because you're basically just sort of it's not the right way of doing the process. You need to start from your own personal sort of reaction to the brief, and then start with your own practice. Otherwise it kind of loses that kind of core essence of what the reason you're doing it, and also your kind of drive and motivation towards it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's a caution.
And also just in the context of art school, you know, like it's very easy to be like, oh, I'm going to put all my effort into these awards and kind of do what people want those awards, like try and do the work that might win. But like Jago, you know, people who you've taught as well who just really enjoyed doing a certain thing, like Lewis Benfield and his visuals. Like I'm sure he did he turned some award brief into just making visuals, I think, like for DJs. And like now he was never going to win anything, but he just like plowed his passion into it. And like that's what art school is all about. It's not about doing something for Airbnb. It's about you know, following your practice and really exploring what makes you creatively like unique, or what your voice is. Awards aren't everything, basically.
Although it is still a balance. I always think it's that sense that I think as all creative, like people who do creative things who are going to become creative professionals, you just have to understand what is your work and what is something that you're truly interested in, and also know what you're monetizing. Because as we all know, it's one of the hardest things to really monetize is being creative, you know, coming up with ideas and finding ways to support yourself. So these briefs are great for learning that, I think. It was my first experience of learning about what clients want and what clients need. But I think towards this point, it's like, make sure you temper that with the fact that you keep something for yourself in these things, and that there's something that's going to keep you going when you're actually doing all the work, and you don't just resent the entire experience later on.
I was doing graphic design, wasn't I, Jago? And then
we won you over. We won you over to the dark side, didn't we? We brought you over to the dark side.
All these people, all these people like rebranding Coca-Cola as their final project. I just hated the idea of that being my like final outcome of art school. So yeah, I went to the dark side of Jago and started making weird stuff, and it was great.
All those Marmite rebrands that you just saw in that 1 year, like three or four Marmite rebrands in one degree show.
Well, this is something we'll talk about after you go through these, is your experience at the D&AD Academy as well, Will, because you were alongside all of these winning design graduates, and you were a design communicator, and they were all graphic designers, or a lot of them were.
A lot of them are advertising creatives as well.
Which is probably even worse, isn't it?
Oh no, it's like the problem is, I think I kind of got graphic communication and advertising do actually sort of seem to chime quite well sometimes in terms of the way that we approach projects. And obviously not advertising can be incredibly fickle. But anyway, but the we'll finish these and then we'll, because that's that is a kind of whole. But yeah, this is purely about the simplification or sort of like chopping things down, being concise, making sure you can elevator pitch it or tweet it, whichever of those little sort of tests you do, like like any of these little kind of like methods to kind of try and encapsulate an idea really quickly.
I think it's worth mentioning you're allowed to reverse engineer. So we had all these like the app idea and hermit crabs and all this weird stuff, and then we just cut it down, and then we got to the belonging is about exploring is about discovery, and then yeah, basically that was the core idea, and saying that in front of anything we did was so much easier to sell in the idea afterwards, or the execution. The idea, then the execution is all these bits that go around it.
I'd say in terms of like, so what I do a lot in my job now is sort of kind of working that kind of advertising creative kind of role, is the fact that we have to like set up all these like the setup slides. And for me, the belonging is discovery, and you know, that entire sort of section of answering the brief is very much the problem and insight setup of the idea. And then when you're talking about, like for me, when we're talking about tweet, like what the idea is as a tweet, it would be around the idea of creating an app, like what the actual thing is, you know, what at the end of the day, what is this thing outside of the mystical stuff? It's like, what does it do, how does it work, and that kind of thing. And if you can sell that in a tweet, that's when you know that the function is simple enough so that everything else is going to be a lot simpler afterwards.
Mm-hmm. And you know that you understand it, don't you?
Yeah, completely.
Ultimately.
As I proved a bunch of times, sometimes we don't understand our own ideas.
Yeah.
I don't understand it sometimes.
Yeah. So this section was about was very much about how you can kind of take an idea which kind of almost can sometimes feel like you could do it for a bunch of different brands, and you make it feel very much for that brand. With Airbnb, it was like in talking about brand equity in that kind of way, like what do they have that we can use as part of this project which makes it uniquely for like from them. And for this, it was Airbnb hosts essentially. So Airbnb hosts is something that they like, so for Airbnb, it's like a resource that they have which can provide content, like these authentic stories and knowledge. And we can leverage that and use that as part of the app. So the app could be for, so you could probably make that app for a music festival and kind of make it work. However, for Airbnb, they have like a really kind of like sort of committed, knowledgeable user base. And so using that makes it feel like it's like it really fits them. It's like a great way of also adding a bit of fuel to the fire as well in terms of the idea having some potential. So I think that's always a good thing, like to kind of think about when you're developing your idea, to think like, what resources does the brand have? Like what kind of engagement from their audience and their community do they have? You know, sort of like, do they have a particular like an iconic status? Do they sort of do they represent a certain community in a certain place, and that sort of thing? And then so you can kind of leverage that the same way that like you see like brands like McDonald's and stuff using their really iconic branding to make points or to make use certain concept, because that's like an equity, that's like an asset for them that they can use, and they can kind of use their advantage in a sense. So it's almost like kind of rallying your troops or sort of seeing what ammunition you've got to really make the most of the idea.
Yeah, when in the agencies I've worked in, it's like, where does someone have permission to play, and how do we give them the permission to play in that area? You know, that person being a brand in that sense. So, you know, Nike, it's about the athlete, it's not the products. You know, and that's leveraging their strongest asset is the people who use the shoes. So, similar thinking with Airbnb. It's like it's not about the locations or the houses themselves, it's about the hosts and the actual users.
Definitely. This is about the making sure it works part. And if Andrew, you want to?
Oh yeah. So I worked in a consultancy that did a lot of big blue sky thinking for like brands, like basically what they could do with retail spaces. And it's all well and good, and this applies to D&AD as well, I think, but it's all well and good coming up with crazy ideas using technology that kind of might exist and like, or could be done in the future, but 99% of a good idea is it actually living and breathing in real life, like when it's actually is interacting with people in the world. And I mean, there's a space for, you know, speculative, exciting ideas, but I think things that, particularly when a D&AD, are stuff that could very easily be done, or not easily be done, but they're in the realms of reality, you know. And there's a lot of people who make a good living out of just coming up with ideas, but the people who are really like world leaders and everything they do are people who make stuff.
So it's also a good.
I don't know if you agree with that, Jago, but that's kind of my impression of.
Yeah, well, the people who are making the real change are the people who are doing things with purpose, and those purposes are things that we can connect with instantly, can't we? You know, and I think you're totally right, really. And that's there's something in that of a good idea, isn't it? Which is something that we can instantly connect with, and something that we can instantly see has a purpose and will make great change as well, won't it? You know, you're absolutely right.
I think like as a little kind of safeguard, especially if you're doing interviews after you've done your project and you're happy with it, maybe even won an award, especially if it's a good idea, people will start asking questions like, did you make a prototype of it? Do you have anything that we can play with? Does and then I think I had an experience of going into an interview where I wanted to click through the UX of something that I'd made. And then the guy said, no, I'll do that, and took it off me. And then very quickly found all the kind of gaps in terms of the user experience that I hadn't thought of. Because up until then, I'd been the person clicking through, and I hadn't gone through that kind of attention to detail, that due diligence of making sure that it was watertight in that sense. Which I think sometimes for D&AD things, you don't need to do them for that March deadline. But if you're taking the project on later, like definitely a lot of innovation design sort of areas will want you to try and prototype something if it's a cool idea, or to try and make it, you know, try and see if you can make a version of it in some way. So I guess that's more one for after you finish your project, after you've submitted your video and you've done your big concept video and your idea, to kind of think like, could we make a kind of like an MVP of this, like a minimal viable product of this or something, you know. It's a fun thing.
Great facts. We love a lot of facts, don't we?
This one is purely about the idea that won our category was I think it was based around the idea of getting your neighbours to offer to Airbnb for your mates when they or your parents when they come and visit you at uni. And it was a pretty simple idea, but it was really punchy and attention grabbing because the guy rapped it. So he made a whole rap song to present the entire idea. It came on with like a big kind of booming backing track, and just caught everyone's attention. And it was great when they played it at the award show. Even though I was incredibly bitter at the time, I still had to acknowledge the idea that it was actually it really kind of grabbed attention because I think talking about the academy, that was one of the things that I got kind of hammered home to me in the academy, was the idea that although we can do like an app explainer video to talk about, you know, the app and go through the points and kind of in a very like logical way, you can be really creative with how you do where you really kind of hit home with what the point of, like, if it's like belonging is discovering, you can kind of find a way to really we call it like pitch theater, you know, that idea that you do a big like a performance thing of performing the idea in some way as the medium. It's something that can really make a difference. An example would
the video you're talking about, the thing that won the gold pencil or the yellow pencil. So it was the insight was Airbnbs are used a lot in like tourist hotspots, but they're not used in, you know, provincial towns and like places where your mum and dad live. So the idea was to help Airbnb spread their market, was getting people in these, you know, towns and villages to rent out to local people when their mates needed to stay or whatever. And so then the rap itself was almost like some kid rapping in his bedroom. And it was like very like amateur, but that kind of amateurness made it really powerful because it was about your normal people in little towns. That's kind of
another example I was thinking of is so in the D&AD Academy experience, they set a brief where we had to essentially come up with a way of selling kind of doing brand awareness for Innocent Smoothie, so a smoothie brand for like 18 to 25-year-olds and finding a certain problem. And the team that won it, their entire idea was that fruit is fucking awkward. Basically, that was the line. And so to sell that in at the start of their presentation, what they did is one of them just boldly got up in front of all of this whole room of creative directors and agency people, stood silently on stage, took out a banana from his pocket and stared dead in the eyes of one of the people, and just slowly ate the banana for about 30 seconds to a minute, in the most uncomfortable 30 seconds I've ever seen. And then at the end, just took the skin, threw it to the side of the stage and said, "Fruit is fucking awkward." And that was their way of launching into it. And it was like, so I like, obviously videos and that sort of medium will be different in terms of how you make that happen. But like finding something which just kind of hits off with the idea in a very kind of theatrical, performative way, I think is a great way of like really grabbing people's attention.
So again, that's kind of about not being reserved with your creativity, and it's about taking risks, isn't it, Will? How are you guys, since you won your awards, how have you been opening up to taking those risks, isn't it, really? Which is like moving away from those templates of knowing how things can be presented and constructed, but turning it into something completely unique and personal, isn't it?
Well, it's like, I think it's where you find that the boundaries of like what you think you do don't really exist in that sense. So in agencies I worked in, we've done sort of public speaking workshops. I do improv theatre and comedy and things if you want to get better at being like good at pitching, or because ideas aren't like, I think one of the great things about doing graphic design and also potentially being a creative is that you get licensed to have ideas for everything in this kind of weird, it's a weird role in a lot of times, because you can have ideas for a play if it makes sense for someone who's funding it, you know, and so you can kind of, and so with that you can kind of just take on like remember that you're presenting ideas, you're engaging people, you know, think about how you listen better or something, do like, you know, actively try and get better at that. And in these kind of workshops and things, or these kind of learning new skills, you can find ways to broaden what you're going to output or what you're going to perform or how you're going to get the message across in a way that is like less expected and really kind of gets people like excited about the idea. I don't know if Andy, you think the same.
I think so. You get a lot of people in the creative industries who, or the clients mainly, who they want to know exactly what you're going to do is going to work, and that's not ever going to happen. So like it's most of the battle is convincing someone that there's a business case for it, or it will communicate in the right way. But sometimes the most crazy ideas are the ones that really resonate with people, and it's because they're like authentic, and it's because they're the right medium for the message. And sometimes going out of your comfort zone to do something that feels a bit amateurish or feels a bit too provocative can be the thing that's a more powerful idea.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a bit of like, a bit of human vulnerability as well, and sort of and thinking about how you relate to the people you're selling it to. I think one of the things, talking about Andy, to your point about the idea of like whether a client's going to like ready for it in a sense, is that clients need to trust you as well. This is very much like once you start working, you need to, especially if you do your own projects directly to clients in that way, is that you need to like foster trust with them by maybe doing a few projects which are just going to run really smoothly. Then you hit them with a big creative idea later on or something, or thinking about how they're reacting and how ready they are for a big creative idea and how much they're going to kind of like, you know, almost like you're sort of trying to kind of, you know, lead them to jump off a diving board a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that point you just made there, Will, about buying into an idea, like, or being able to execute on an idea, like the thing that we came up with on a very base level, it could have been hosts recommending bars in their local area. But then on the most expensive, hard to develop side of it, it's the whole app experience. But the way that idea can scale is what makes it like a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Scaling ideas for sure.
And I mean, it's one of those, a really good thing to do is everyone comes up with app ideas all the time, but how does that app experience live outside of an app? Like what's that core product doing, and then can that translate to something that's not an app?
Mm-hmm.
I remember, Jago, you used to kind of like sort of encourage us to kind of think about things in that way, like kind of going like say like what if the Torch app was a card game? You know, what if it was a different format? What if you couldn't rely on those sorts of things? And I think by doing that, you find what's the actual essence of like the function of it. Like I think in my first job, the creative director used to design board games on the side as like a little side passion. And board games are incredibly similar to app experiences, or like kind of like the way, like just the way that they work in terms of simulating certain things and sort of conveying information. There are loads of like there are lots of different sort of parallel kind of like bits of design or sort of kind of like constructions where you can figure out what we're really doing. You know, what's the thing we're really doing. We're sort of putting our faith in something to kind of give us a bit of serendipity. We're trying to manufacture serendipity, you know, for when we're exploring somewhere, you know. And so yeah, you can be quite kind of those little kind of. But I'm sure your students know that because I'm sure you've been doing that all the time. You know.
Tell us, was it worth doing the D&AD experience then? When you went to the academy, did it open doors and sort of move you along in your career as well?
Yeah, definitely. I had my internship I got off the back of it was from that experience, there were just loads of creative directors from all different agencies in London there all the time, and so you can like it is still a kind of thing where you turn up and you have to go up and talk to these people and make weird excuses, and I think I kind of bullied myself into that quite well at that time. Like we went to Google and I kind of managed to go and like be at the coffee station at the right time to go and talk to the creative director and that sort of thing, and be a bit weird in that kind of way. And sometimes you need to let go of your ego a bit. Was that?
Parts of networking.
Where it's like you need to kind of, there's a thing which is looking good, which I think is the thing that you should get rid of a bit, because everyone wants to go to these things and look good and be like very competent, but you know nothing when you leave uni, when you head into the world of work, especially in terms of what they care about. You need to be a sponge. And so you need to like know that you're going to look a bit awkward and ask the wrong thing and stand in the wrong place, and people kind of go. I remember I did that all the time. I get so many things of people going, yeah, don't worry, Will, not now. You can go sit back at your thing, you know, or like volunteering for everything, and people go, yeah, someone else might want to volunteer. But you could kind of, but I don't regret any of it. It's that sort of thing, because it is sort of how these things occur, and being available and jumping at opportunities make when they come around, you people think of you to jump onto it.
I think that's a good point to make, actually. Like, particularly when you're at the start of your career, people are looking for like passion and drive, and like it's not even people can teach like, you know, execution or craft, but teaching like a point of view and a kind of ambition is really difficult. So that's kind of what people look for, is that eagerness to learn and like just be open to ideas and things. Like
well, I think also in terms of
that's almost more like, if you look at the Airbnb video, we like the typography is shite, and it's really like we messed up all these branded elements that like should have counted, but it didn't count because the idea was better, you know. And even in interviews, people didn't focus on the tracking being completely off, or like weird animations. It was about like,
well, I think
the point of view that we had.
I think the fact that Andy still loses sleep over at night over those tracking things, whereas I'd forgotten about them entirely, shows the reason why.
We did +10, not -10. It's terrible.
Oh yeah, no, it was really, really horrible. No, but also talking to the well, like, because me and Andy went down two separate paths. Obviously, Andy, you went into being like a designer and working on branding projects, and I went into like this sort of like art director style advertising campaign kind of thing, which is more about. I remember one of the guys who I used to kind of shadow at the start of it was used to always use the term sort of quick and dirty when it was coming up to making pitch presentations, where if anyone saw those Photoshop files afterwards, they would be an absolute nightmare, because it was just sort of grabbing images and stuffing them together. And it's because it kind of works. It works really well when you're kind of trying to come up with the idea of and it's that sort of quick kind of art directing process of trying to sell something in, at least it's an advertising sense. But I think one of the points I wanted to make earlier when we were talking about the whole looking good thing is that my video for the to get into the academy was basically like making me look like a complete dork. I think that was my entire intention, to look like a complete nerd or like someone who was really awkward, as a way to kind of sell that idea. And I think sometimes those sorts of things, and being a bit kind of vulnerable and kind of going for it, I can share that video later on if that helps anyone, if they get to that stage and they want to figure out, because everyone that I know that got into it, they when I saw their submission videos, because obviously I don't know if you guys know this, but to get into the academy you have to answer 5 questions, and then in some medium or format you can make a video, or you can like do like illustrations or something. You just got to respond and say why, like things like why should you get into the academy. And I could actually show the video if you got time.
If you've got it on you, Will, that would be fun.
I did really quickly. It's not.
So I didn't get into the academy.
Did you apply, Andy, like Will?
I think so. Basically, if you win any of the awards, you get invited to apply to this New Blood Academy. And I think at that point I'd had enough of doing anything that required any responsibility. So I was busy, drinking too much, etc.
Enjoying being liberated from school.
The liberation of uni life.
But Will was hard for it. He wanted it, didn't he? He was hungry. Yeah.
This goes back to the same theme of the fact that I'm just a loser who signs up for everything. Because I remember you did some videos where you were talking about the practice of like you wanted to get people to talk through the learning outcomes, and then I think you just walked in went, oh, Will do this. He's a Labrador that kind of seems to.
Yeah. Always had your hand up.
Yeah, exactly, and hand out.
Have you found your video? You're going into the old archive now, are you?
Old Vimeo stuff. Yeah, no,
I think it's worth saying that it's not the be and end all of like if you'll be successful or whatever when you graduate doing D&AD. Like
that's true.
Like all the people I'm really jealous of in terms of what their job is now didn't win any awards or anything. They just kind of did what they really loved doing.
You're not really jealous of me now, Andy?
Not you.
He's just putting the boot in a little bit, Will.
Just before Will shows you this, because also the nature of this video also might slightly make you think of the reason why Andy didn't get in based on the concept of it. Wait, have I shared my screen? I'm going to share.
Yeah, we've got it. No, we've got it there. But check the audio again.
Yeah.
And then we'll ask the group here in Brazil if they've got any questions for you, and we can let you get off.
Is it there? There we go.
What object would you choose to represent yourself, your skills, and why?
I've got pretty good authority from an online quiz that my spirit animal is a falcon. This is based on being determined, aspirational, and intense. So in terms of an object, I guess it would have to be a taxidermied falcon, which
What would excite a 10-year-old you?
I feel like I'm still in connection with the 10-year-old me. So I am, and if I know him well enough, I think there's a combination of 3 things, and that's copious amounts of Warhammer, sliding down hills and in postage sacks, and this riff.
Who or what has inspired you creatively in your life and why?
Well, if I look back across all of my artistic career or my creative timeline with that GCSEs, A-levels before, I think about 50% of my work's been about dogs. I don't know whether that is whether different various projects, but everything seems to be centered around dogs. I suppose you could say it's my dad because he was a creative director and he was an artist and he influenced me that way. But I think I give it to the family dog.
Finish this statement. If I get a place at the New Blood Academy, I will.
Well, the question's really what would I do if I didn't get into D&AD? Seeing as
I have the unfortunate pleasure of applying alongside my teammate Andrew Heirons, who I don't think will let me live it down if he gets in and I don't. So if I could speak to the powers that be at D&AD and just say if I don't get in, could you please make sure that he doesn't either? But obviously if you do consider me, that'll be an amazing opportunity, and I feel like there's a lot I can contribute in terms of creative enthusiasm, and and I feel like there's a lot that I can take away from such an opportunity. So thanks for considering me. Thank you very much.
So you can kind of judge it however you want in terms of whether that's the reason as to Andy didn't get in or not. But like basically under the bus. But no, kind of clunky and awkward. But I think I spoke to one of the creative directors at the place I ended up working. She'd seen my video, and I asked her why she thought it was good, and I think it just kind of showed the idea that I was willing to kind of do a video where I looked weird in it, and it wasn't that kind of like. It shows a bit of intent. And obviously, like, kind of, I imagine going to uni now in terms of the way that people create content online and stuff. The idea of doing something fun. I think two of the girls that were on the academy, they re-recorded a Spice Girls music video and then did the entire thing, but changed all the words to "We really need to be at the academy" or something. And then so you can do kind of fun things. It's a good chance to like. I think it's quite random as to whether you get on there or not, and basically so just kind of like throw it all at the wall and see what happens, and be really kind of creative about your entry video, and that's the best way to approach it, I find.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thanks, Will, and the dork Will from the past. Thanks for the video. Okay, I'm just going to open it up to the group here. Anyone got anything you want to ask about any of the sort of anything we were talking about, any of D&AD, anything you're unsure of that these guys can help you with? Any tips or pointers?
I'm happy to give my email out as well, so people can
same.
send me messages afterwards.
Yeah, good one. All right, guys.
we are just starting to think about it, so it's not something we are doing right now, so still very fresh. So
yeah, I think as soon as when you get those briefs, just kind of let yourself think of all the silly first things you think of, and just really give them all a bit of time just to see what starts to click.
Bruna, are you working in a group? Are you working with someone else on your project?
yeah, me and Pedro are working together.
Okay. Will, Andy, any tips on working in groups, or maybe not?
Choose your partner wisely, because you end up having to stick with them for a long time.
Yeah.
Choose someone who you generally order the same stuff and deliver it. Me and Annie spend a lot of time together in small dark rooms, and so you have to choose someone who you're willing to spend a lot of time with, and you kind of share the same food taste and stuff. And yeah, obviously, like, I think it really is that. I think also potentially, well, I'd say me and Andy kind of overlap in a bunch of areas sometimes, but obviously you're all designers, so you can kind of you have to kind of find a way of reconciling that and choosing different parts of the project that each of you can really own in that sort of sense. Yeah, but
that's a really good point. I think because you were more like ideas man, weren't you, at one point, and then I was more like the graphic designer person. So, but that made it really good because one person could craft while one person wrote copy, and like we allowed ourselves to like play to our times.
Yeah, I think that's it's a weird process, because I think it's really hard to get right. Like, I've definitely ruined a load of group projects by being domineering, and I think the weird thing that me and Andy had is that we kind of respected what each other did and kind of didn't get in each other's way, which I think is definitely hard. I know, like, but it definitely gets easier. So like now in the industry I work in, I've got a copywriting partner, so it's very obvious where those lines lie in a sense. And I think, but within graphic design and within especially graphic communication, you've got some people who might be really good at articulating the ideas. You've got some people who might have really good like video production skills and sort of things. But you kind of need to agree. You need to get together and really agree on how you articulate, like what the core of this is for both of you, and then be able to go and expand out later on. But especially using people's talents and abilities to your benefit is only going to help. You know, letting Andy agonize over a typeface for 3 hours is a real asset to every project, basically.
Yeah. And maybe on a last word, if none of our students have got anything to say, anyone got anything else they'd like to ask? Maybe a little bit about that hope, right, of time, Will, Andy, because you said you worked a hell of a lot of time on the hermit crab idea. How long did you work on that last idea? How quick did you turn it around, your final idea?
2 or 3 weeks, maybe.
Few weeks. There you go. Yeah.
I reckon you could turn it. I reckon if you were just actually focused on one idea or focused on one project, like one brief, right? Because at that time we were working on a bunch of different distracting briefs. And if there's anything that's the worst thing when you're doing anything like a project, is being distracted by other stuff and other things that aren't related. Working on one brief, you could definitely get it done in 2 weeks. I've done a bunch of work on the Young Lions competitions. They're ones that are more advertising based, but definitely something worth checking out. It's more once you get into the industry, and I think potentially before, but that's you come up with an idea in a day or in 2 days. And I can share some of the stuff actually of that later on in terms of, but you can look it up online, and what people come up with by doing a 24-hour period, you'll be surprised with how you can get stuff done quickly, and you can kind of really nail something down very within no time at all. Does not mean you should leave it till the last day though, like I would probably have done.
I think to add a bit more color to that, we spent, you know, a few weeks kind of building up like the foundations of the ideas and the different things, but like I don't think we didn't even start making or thinking about the video until the last week itself.
Right.
And we did, you know, I think we once spent 2 like 20-hour days back to back, like in my room in my flat, just animating and stuff. So it was maybe a bit too late. It was a bit late in the day, but like getting everything down on paper is the easy bit. It's the working it all out beforehand and giving yourself time to explore those routes in enough detail to know if it will work or not is.
Yeah, I think also give yourself like this never happens, but finish it a week early and test it with people. You know what I mean? Like I'm a classic for, especially at that stage, for finishing an idea, sending it to people on the Friday, and it's going to be submitted on the Saturday, and just telling them not to give me any feedback because it will break my heart at this stage. You know, so you gotta really kind of, if you actually want to utilize that feedback, got to go, okay, have I actually got time to make these amends? I remember on the day of when we were sending that, my stepdad sent me a message going, video's a bit long. And that's what I thought going into it, was going, we need to shave 10 seconds off it or something. So that's definitely a good thing. Like being timely. If you can go into the industry, being timely and doing things before deadlines and testing stuff, then you're, you know, that'd be an amazing trait to have.
Great.
Yeah. Also, same as Andy, if you any questions, feel free to email. I'll share my email and stuff. And if you want us to like create any work, or me to create any work, or Andy, I don't know if he wants to offer that. Available as well.
Yeah, nice. Let's see. Really wonderful to have you two guys here with us, virtually. But come over one day. Hey, let's see what we can do. I'm not going anywhere soon anyway, so I think I'll be here for a little while longer for sure. Thanks for sharing your experience, guys. Stay on the line, and we'll just have a chat before you go.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, thanks. You too. Moving into year 3. Do what you can do. Okay. See you later. Thanks, Luana.
See you later. Bye.
Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.
Thank you, guys.
Happy hands. Lovely.
Okay.
Good to see you, JG.
Hey, gang. All right there, you two. Always.
Andy, I have to ask you about this as well, Andy. I just screenshot it.
I screenshot it as well, yeah.
What's that? You were